Ingersoll's lecture on Talmagian Theology. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Ingersoll's lecture on Talmagian Theology from the book Lectures of Colonel R.G. Ingersoll. Ladies and gentlemen, nothing can be more certain than that no human being can by any possibility control his thought. We are in this world. We see, we hear, we feel, we taste, and everything in nature makes an impression upon the brain. And that wonderful something enthroned there with these materials weaves what we call thought, and the brain can no more help thinking than the heart can help beating. The blood pursues its old accustomed round without our will. The heart beats without asking leave of us, and the brain thinks in spite of all that we can do. This being true, no human being can justly be held responsible for his thought any more than for the beating of his heart, any more than for the course pursued by the blood, any more than for breathing air. And yet, for thousands of years, thought has been thought to be a crime, and thousands and millions have threatened us with eternal fire if we give the product of that brain. Each brain, in my judgment, is a field where nature sows the seeds of thought, and thought is the crop that man reaps, and it certainly cannot be a crime to gather. It certainly cannot be a crime to tell it, which simply amounts to the right to sell your crop or to exchange your product for the product of some other man's brain. That is all it is. Most brains, at least some, are rather poor fields, and the orthodox worst of all. That field produces mostly sorrel and mullein, while there are fields which, like the tropic world, are filled with growth, and where you find the vine and palm, royal children of the sun and brain. I then stand simply for absolute freedom of thought. Absolute. And I don't believe, if there be a God, that it will be or can be pleasing to him to see one of his children afraid to express what he thinks. And if I were God, I never would cease making men until I succeeded in making one grand enough to tell his honest opinion. Now, there has been a struggle, you know, a long time, between the believers in the natural and the supernatural, between gentlemen who are going to reward us in another world, and those who propose to make life worth living here and now. In all ages, the priest, the medicine man, the magician, the astrologer, in other words, gentlemen who have traded upon the fear and ignorance of their fellow man in all countries, they have sought to make their living out of others. There was a time when a god presided over every department of human interest, when a man about to take a voyage bribed the priest of Neptune so that he might have a safe journey. And when he came back he paid more, telling the priest that he was infinitely obliged to him, that he had kept waves from the sea and storms in their caves. And so, when one was sick, he went to a priest. When one was about to take a journey, he visited a priest of Mercury. If he were going to war, he consulted the representative of Mars. We have gone along. When the poor agriculturist plowed his ground and put in the seed, he went to the priest of some god and paid him to keep off the frost. And the priest said he would do it. But, added the priest, you must have faith. If the frost came early, he said, you didn't have faith. And besides all that, he says to him, anything that has happened badly, after all, was for your good. Well, we found out day by day that a good boat for the purpose of navigating the sea was better than prayers, better than the influence of priests. And you had better have a good captain attending to business than thousands of priests ashore praying. We also found that we could cure some diseases, and just as soon as we found that we could cure diseases, we dismissed the priest. We have left him out now of all of them, except it may be cholera and smallpox. When visited by a plague, some people get frightened enough to go back to the old idea. Go back to the priest, and the priest says, "It has been sent as a punishment." Well, sensible people began to look about. They saw that the good died as readily as the bad. They saw that this disease would attack the dimpled child in the cradle, and allow the murderer to go unpunished. And so they began to think in time that it was not sent as a punishment, that it was a natural result, and so the priest stepped out of medicine. In agriculture we needed him no longer. He has nothing to do with the crops. All the clergymen in this world can never get one drop of rain out of the sky, and all the clergymen in the civilized world could not save one human life if they tried it. Oh, but they say, we do not expect a direct answer to prayer. It is the reflex action we are after. It is like a man endeavoring to lift himself up by the straps of his boots. He will never do it, but he will get a great deal of useful exercise. The missionary goes to some pagan land, and there he finds a man praying to a god of stone, and it excites the wrath of the missionary. I ask you tonight, does not that stone god answer prayer just as well as ours? Does he not cause rain? Does he not delay frost? Does he not snatch the ones that we love from the grasp of death precisely the same as ours? Yet we have ministers that are still engaged in that business. They tell us that they have been called, that they do not go at their profession as other people do, but they are called, that God, looking over the world, carefully selects his priests, his ministers, and his exhorters. I don't know. They say their calling is sacred. I say to you tonight that every kind of business that is honest, that a man engages in for the purpose of feeding his wife and children, for the purpose of building up his home, for the purpose of feeding and clothing the ones he loves, that business is sacred. They tell us that statesmen and poets, philosophers, heroes, and scientists and inventors come by chance, that all other departments depend entirely upon luck, but when God wants exhorters, he selects. They also tell us that it is infinitely wicked to attack the Christian religion. And when I speak of the Christian religion, I do not refer especially to the Christianity of the New Testament. I refer to the Christianity of the Orthodox Church. And when I refer to the clergy, I refer to the clergy of the Orthodox Church. There was a time when men of genius were in the pulpits of the Orthodox Church. That time is past. When you find a man with brains now occupying an Orthodox pulpit, you will find him touched with heresy. Every one of them. How do they get most of these ministers? There will be a man in the neighborhood not very well, not having constitution enough to be wicked, and it instantly suggests itself to everybody who sees him that he would make an excellent minister. There are so many other professions, so many cities to be built, so many railways to be constructed, so many poems to be sung, so much music to be composed, so many papers to edit, so many books to read, so many splendid things, so many avenues to distinction and glory, so many things beckoning from the horizon of the future to every great and splendid man, that the pulpit has to put up with the leavings, ravelings, selvage. These preachers say, how can any man be wicked and infamous enough to attack our religion and take from the world the solace of Orthodox Christianity? What is that solace? Let us be honest. What is it? If the Christian religion be true, the grandest, greatest, noblest of the world are now in hell, and the narrowest and meanest are now in heaven. Humboldt, the Shakespeare of science, the most learned man of the most learned nation, with a mind grand enough to grasp not simply this globe, but this constellation, a man who shed light upon the whole earth, a man who honored human nature, and who won all his victories on the field of thought. That man, pure and upright, noble beyond description, if Christianity be true, is in hell this moment. That is what they